I wasn't supposed to be home yet. The Friday night air outside had the kind of sharp spring chill that made me hug my trench coat tighter as I climbed the porch steps of the two-story colonial I once called home. My flight had landed an hour early, and instead of heading to the hotel I'd planned, something, maybe curiosity, maybe a tug of nostalgia, steered my rental car here. Through the front window, the warm glow of the living room lamps spilled across the lawn. I caught the faint scent of fresh mulch and lilacs, my mother's annual planting ritual. For a heartbeat, it almost felt like I was 17 again, coming home from a late shift at the diner. Then I heard it, the scrape of cardboard on hardwood. I eased the door open just enough to see my parents, Dad in his old flannel, Mom with her hair pulled into a frazzled bun, bent over an open wardrobe box. My clothes. My framed photos. The cream cashmere sweater I bought last winter with my first bonus. Mom's voice floated across the room, low but matter-of-fact. She'll thank us once she settles into that studio. Less space, less pressure. Studio? My chest tightened. Dad grunted as he lifted a stack of my books. She's too proud to ask for help, but we can make the transition easier. She'll see it's for the best. The cardboard flap creaked shut. Something inside me, something I'd kept carefully buried under layers of professionalism and polite phone calls, flared to life. I was 19 the night the house stopped feeling like home. The late, summer air pressed heavy against the windows, and the faint buzz of cicadas leaked through the screen door as I stood in the hallway, clutching a duffel bag like it might anchor me. Mom's voice, sharp and certain, cut through the hum. Lila, you can't keep chasing whatever this is. You need something real, a plan, not a dream. She used my full name like it was a verdict. I do have a plan, I whispered, my throat tight. It just doesn't look like yours. Dad folded his arms, his jaw locked. Art isn't a career. You'll burn through your savings and come crawling back. We're trying to help you before you wreck your future. I'd heard it all before. How sketchbooks were hobbies, how studios were just expensive daydreams. But tonight their words landed heavier, almost rehearsed, as if they'd finally agreed on what to do about me. My palms dampened. So, what? What happens if I don't quit? Mom's eyes softened for a fraction of a second, then hardened again. Then you're on your own. The lump in my throat pulsed like a heartbeat. For a flicker of time, I almost begged them to see me, really see me. But the memory of countless dinner table debates, the quiet sighs when I showed them my work, crushed that last bit of hope. Behind me, the front door creaked. My grandmother, June, stepped in from the porch. She'd been listening, of course. Silver hair pulled into a loose bun. She carried the scent of jasmine tea and the calm that had always steadied me. Without a word, she slipped something into my hand, a smooth, palm-sized river stone she'd kept on her nightstand for decades. On its flat surface she'd painted, years ago, a tiny gold star. Her eyes met mine, warm and unwavering. When you doubt yourself, she said quietly, hold on to this. It's proof you can shine even when they can't see it. The stone's cool weight anchored me. My parents kept talking about responsibility, about rent and reality, but their voices blurred into static. I tightened my grip on the star, lifted my duffel higher, and stepped into the night. The air smelled of rain and cut grass, like something waiting to be born. I didn't look back. I can still feel the metallic chill of the subway pole against my palm that first winter in Chicago. My breath came out in tiny clouds as the train screeched through tunnels, a soundtrack to my private vow. I will build a life that no one can pack into boxes. The first few months were brutal. I rented a single room above a florist shop, so small I had to shuffle sideways between the bed and the wall. At night, the scent of wilting roses mixed with the heat of the old radiator, a strange perfume of survival. I worked double shifts, mornings at a neighborhood cafe, nights at a downtown marketing agency that barely paid for my bus fare. It was at the agency that I met Marian Blake, the creative director with a crown of silver curls and eyes like sharpened steel. She noticed how I stayed late, scribbling campaign ideas in the margins of client briefs. One night, she leaned over my shoulder and said, You've got something rare. Don't you dare let anyone make you small. Marianne became the kind of mentor my own mother never had time, or maybe the heart, to be. She showed me how to pitch to impossible clients, how to make numbers sing like poetry. I soaked up every lesson, every correction, every story she shared about the battles she'd fought to be heard. Some evenings I walked home past glowing office towers, my reflection trailing behind me in the glass like a ghost of the girl I used to be. I'd clutch the small silver compass my grandmother had given me, the one thing I'd saved when I left home. Its needle quivered with every step, reminding me that direction mattered more than speed. Small victories came like shy visitors. My first big client, a boutique travel company, loved a tagline I'd written and doubled their contract. The first time a paycheck cleared that covered both rent and a decent winter coat, I cried in the stairwell of my building. No one saw. I learned to camouflage my progress when speaking to my parents. Calls were quick, surface level. I'd mention the cafe job, never the agency promotion. My Instagram showed lattes and sunsets, never the sleek conference rooms where my ideas were becoming billboards across the city. When the agency offered me a senior strategist role, complete with a salary that would have stunned my old self, I celebrated alone. I bought a single tulip from the florist downstairs, set it in a chipped mason jar, and whispered, "We did it," to the compass on my nightstand. The secrecy wasn't bitterness. It was protection. If they believed I was barely scraping by, they wouldn't come for what I was building. And I needed these years in the dark, the way a seed needs soil and silence before it breaks through to the light. I wasn't hiding forever. I was just waiting until my success was strong enough to stand without their approval, waiting for the day I'd open the door and let the truth dazzle them. I arrived at my own doorstep with a heartbeat that sounded like the ticking of a clock I hadn't wound in years. Steady, inevitable. The evening light spilled across the porch, warm and honeyed, but my palms were ice. I'd received their text only an hour ago. "We're coming by to talk." That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just coming by. I cracked the door open and there they were, Mom clutching a casserole dish, as if it were a peace offering, Dad standing stiff, his face a careful mask. Behind them, my younger brother Tyler, wide-eyed, clearly drafted into this surprise mission. "Hi, sweetheart," Mom began, her voice too bright. "We thought we'd drop in. It's been a while." I stepped aside, letting them enter my loft. No studio apartment here, no cramped, dimly lit space they once said I'd be lucky to afford. My home unfolded in airy layers, a double-height living room with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Manhattan skyline, an oak dining table draped in the soft glow of pendant lights, walls adorned with black and white photographs from my travels. The scent of jasmine from the candles lingered like a gentle, knowing smile. Mom's gaze swept across the room. Her shoulders stiffened. Dad's eyes flicked to the grand piano in the corner, my indulgence after my first six-figure month. Tyler's mouth fell open a little, as if he'd stepped onto a movie set. "This is nice," Mom said finally, her voice a fraction too low. "Nice," Tyler echoed, grinning. "This is insane, Kay. Where did all this come from?" I crossed the hardwood floor, my heels clicking like punctuation marks. "From the work you all thought would never amount to anything." My words were even, but my chest ached with a mix of old hurt and new pride. Dad cleared his throat. "We weren't concerned. You left without a plan. We thought you'd be safer. In a tiny studio you picked for me, packed up my things without asking." The memory of that day still burned, their hands boxing up my life like it was a phase to be contained. Mom's lips parted, but no defense came. I moved toward the built-in bookshelf, ran my fingers along the spines of design portfolios and awards. "You told me dreams like mine were cute hobbies, that I'd come crawling back when rent was due. Well," I gestured to the loft, the view, the life I built. "Rent's not a problem anymore." Tyler gave a low whistle. "So what is this? You're famous or something?" I allowed a small, measured smile. "I own a boutique design firm. 3 offices, 12 employees, a client list that makes my old professors jealous. Last quarter, we hit 7 figures in revenue. Dad blinked. Mom's grip on the casserole dish loosened until I feared it might slip. I didn't tell you, I continued, because I needed to prove to myself first. And maybe to prove you wrong. The silence stretched, heavy as velvet. Then Mom exhaled a soft, trembling sound. We underestimated you. Her voice cracked. I only wanted to protect you. But I see now you didn't need protecting. Dad finally met my eyes, his own damp with something that might have been pride or regret. I was wrong, he said simply. I study their faces. The people who once packed away my life like a chore, now standing in the glow of the life I'd built without them. The power had shifted, and not because of the money or the skyline view. It shifted because I no longer needed their approval to feel whole. Tyler broke the quiet with a teasing grin. So, does this mean we're getting that fancy rooftop dinner you promised when you made it? I laughed, the tension easing just a little. We'll see. But my heart whispered something truer. I made it on my terms. I let the silence settle like a soft snowfall before I spoke. My parents stood across the wide marble island in my kitchen, their eyes roaming the sleek black appliances and the panoramic view of the city that stretched like a sea of lights beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. I folded my arms, leaning lightly against the counter. So, I began, my voice calm, almost gentle. You wanted to help me move into a tiny studio. I suppose this isn't what you expected to find. Mom's lips parted, but no words came. Dad cleared his throat, a sound more like a concession than a question. We didn't realize things were like this. Exactly, I said, holding his gaze. Because you never asked. You assumed. For a heartbeat, I let the quiet press in. Years of swallowed words rose up, every slight, every time they'd told me that dreams were nice, but impractical, every moment they'd defined success on their terms. I built this life, I continued, keeping my voice steady. And it wasn't easy. Long nights, empty bank account, days when I nearly gave up. I drew a breath, remembering the long shifts at the design firm, the late-night freelancing that paid for my first cramped apartment. But I made it, without you. And now you want to be involved on your terms. That can't happen unless something changes. Mom's eyes finally met mine. There was guilt there, and something else, hope, maybe. What do you mean, changes? She asked. I walked around the island and placed the small silver locket, my grandmother's, on the counter between us. Grandma gave me this the night I left. She told me, never shrink yourself to fit someone else's comfort. I've lived by that ever since. If we're going to have a relationship, you'll need to live by it too. Dad frowned slightly. Be specific. All right. I ticked each point off on my fingers. First, no more backhanded remarks about my career. I'm not going to defend the legitimacy of my work every holiday. Mom nodded slowly. Second, respect my space. That means no surprise visits and no decisions made for my own good. Ask before you assume what I need. Dad's jaw tightened, then relaxed. Third, I said, softening my tone, I want you both to pursue something you've been putting off, something for you. Mom, that painting class you always talked about. Dad, that volunteer work you kept postponing. Build your own dreams instead of living through mine. They exchanged a glance, hesitant, but thoughtful. I'm not shutting you out, I added, resting a hand lightly on the locket. But I won't let old patterns return. If we're going to be family, it has to be a family built on respect, not control. The tension that had hung between us like a storm cloud began to ease. Mom reached out, her hand trembling, and closed her fingers around the locket. We can try, she whispered. I smiled, small but real. That's all I'm asking. For the first time in years, I felt the ground shift, not beneath me but in my favor. The power wasn't about winning or losing. It was about finally standing in the life I built and inviting them to meet me there. The early autumn sun spilled through my floor-to-ceiling windows, washing the apartment in soft, honey gold light. For the first time in years, The air inside my home felt weightless, like it finally belonged to me. I set a mug of cinnamon-scented coffee on the marble counter and breathed in the quiet. 2 weeks had passed since that night my parents arrived unannounced, since the tense hours when the truth about my life finally rose to the surface. The shock on their faces had haunted me at first, but time had worked a quiet magic. The calls that followed weren't defensive or bitter. They were different. Mom now ends every conversation with, "I'm proud of you," a phrase I'd once thought she'd never say without a trace of expectation. Dad has started asking questions instead of giving orders, small things like, "What do you need from me this week?" The words sound foreign on his tongue, but real. And me? I've stopped waiting for their permission to feel at home in my own success. Yesterday, a small package arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name written in my grandmother's looping script. Inside was the silver locket she'd given me the summer before she passed, the same one I'd clutched during every sleepless night when I first left home. I'd thought it lost. When I clicked it open, the tiny photograph of her smiling face gleamed as if it had been waiting for this moment. On the opposite side, a scrap of paper read, "You already know where you belong." I touched the cool metal against my palm and understood. Belonging had never been about the house I grew up in or the approval I once chased. It lived inside me all along, in the quiet certainty that I could build a life on my own terms and still love the people who had once doubted me. This morning, as I fastened the locket around my neck, I caught my reflection in the glass, steady, luminous, entirely my own. "My name is Olivia Hayes," I whispered, the words of vow and a victory. "And this is the life I chose, big enough to hold both my freedom and my family." The city stirred awake beyond the window, but for one last, perfect moment, the world waited, silent, bright, and full of possibility.